Right, let's start. So today, it's a great pleasure to have Dr. SIvaram, who is one of the leaders, world leaders, actually, I should say, in semiconductor technology. It's a great honor and privilege for us that he has made time to talk to all of us today. He currently serves as the Executive Vice President of Memory Technology at SanDisk Corporation. Dr. SIvaram has 27 years of experience in semiconductors, 3D memory architectures, process technology, equipment, and materials. He has held executive positions at Intel and Matrix, and at SanDisk after its acquisition of Matrix. He founded and led Twin Creeks Technology, a solar panel and equipment company, and has served on the board of a number of startup firms and as an entrepreneur in residence at Crosslink Capital. Dr. SIvaram is a very noted author. He has published numerous technical papers as well as a textbook on CVD, chemical vapor deposition technology, and he holds several patents. He holds a PhD from RPI in New York, and he's a distinguished alumnus of National Institute of Technology, Tiruchi, India. It's a great pleasure and honor to have Dr. SIvaram. Dr. SIvaram.
Thank you, Naveed. I hope you can see me. And let me adjust that. And I hope you can see the slides as well. If you can you acknowledge? By waving your hands. If you can see both the slides and the video? Yes, all right. Very good. So we're going to talk today about two favorite subjects of mine, solar, and the other is entrepreneurship. And so we're going to talk about both of these back and forth. And we'll take the idea of retail, solar in the most common possible way. And we're going to talk about how we, as entrepreneurs, make something useful out of this. Let me also talk about, when I talk about entrepreneurship, I'm not talking about entrepreneurship where people go write new apps for iPhone. We are talking about entrepreneurship in doing things, building things, how we make new things, and an entrepreneur by nature is an optimistic guy. Naveed Bhai, who is here with me, is a famous entrepreneur here, and he's one of the most optimistic people that I know. They see opportunities. They see opportunities, and in the end, they want to make a difference. Of course, you also want to make money in the process. All entrepreneurship goes with that. How can I see a problem? When I see a problem, how can I solve it with some unique solution? And how can I make money in the process? We're going to talk about how, in the physical sciences, what we can do to solve some of these problems together. And I'm going to use solar as the example. And we're going to use two separate companies. In one case, we're going to talk about solar in the very basic science, and in another, pretty complicated science, building large equipment, large machinery, and still making a new idea for solar about it. So I'm going to talk about these two companies and going back to talking about solar. So we'll be going back and forth between entrepreneurship and solar. So let's start with, if I can move this slide. There's a picture of so you can see a picture from space of a large part of the world, Europe and Africa. Okay, so you see the picture as you see from the space shuttle if you would be on space looking down. And you can clearly see Western Europe all lit up. You can see the number of lights glowing in Western Europe. You can see Germany, you can see Italy, you can see England, you can see almost around London where it glows. And then you can see the big part of Africa that's dark. All of Central Africa, there is not a light to be seen. People use this to show, look at the energy consumption in these places. Places where there is a lot of light, they consume a lot of electricity, they consume a lot of power, and they also have very high productivity, very high GDP, very high gross domestic product of these countries. And they always say, see, places that you have high GDP consume a lot of electricity. And places like Africa, where there is no GDP, consume no energy. You look back and think, what's cause and what's the effect? Do people with high GDP consume a lot of electricity? Or do places that consume a lot of energy produce high productivity? Most likely it's the latter. Where you have high consumption of energy, high productivity follows. So what it is just like you have water or food or shelter, energy is a basic necessity. You provide enough energy, productivity automatically follows. Wherever there is energy, around it there will be a settlement, people will produce something, they will trade, commerce will grow, productivity improves, people actually, the quality of life improves. So this picture is probably one of the starkest reminders of that. Where there is power, where there is energy, there is productivity. This is even seen in the olden days. In ancient England, you see that water wheel. Where the water wheel was, there was power locally produced. The guy could use a mill. He could use the mill to grind. When he grinds grain, he makes bread there. Other people come nearby. Agriculture settlements happen. And slowly, industries grow along where power is. So you know for a fact that if you don't have power, you can't have industries. If you're in Pakistan, you're in India, you see power cuts go off during the summer, everything grinds to a halt, productivity goes away, there is no quality of life improvement. Quality of life improves as you start providing power. And you can come back and see, this has been seen everywhere. If you go to the old United States, you can see where the initial settlements were, wherever there was power. This is a fundamental fact of our economy is you have power, you have energy, you have growth. So electricity came to be. Once electricity came to be, there was a very interesting phenomenon that we all have learned. In the middle of this picture, I have a kid's toy store picture of conversion. The reason electricity became so important is for two reasons. One, you could convert that electricity from one form of energy to another form very easily. You could have heat, you could have mechanical energy, you could have information. Everything could be converted back and forth with electricity. If you had water power, you had water power and that's it. You can't do anything else with it. You can have mechanical motion and nothing more. The second thing that electricity can do is you can transmit it. If you didn't have that, if you had water power or wind power, right there, wherever the windmill was, underneath you can do something, but you can't take it anywhere else. So two major things taught us that you want electricity as your favorite power. The favorite power in the world became electricity because A, you can transmit. You can transmit over a long distance. You can produce power in one place and you can consume it in another place. And you can consume it in any form you want. You have an electric motor, you can make it into a mechanical thing. You can use a fan, or you can convert the electricity into light. You can convert the electricity into sound. You can convert the electricity into huge movement of machines. All that could be done from that one form of power. Huge advantage. Once Faraday invented electricity as a usable form, these two things, transmission and ability to use electricity in different forms of energy, made energy what it is today. Electricity became the measure of power. When you say power, we say electricity, we now interchangeably use it. And you can see transmission, big transmission lines. We talk about grids. The last speaker here talked about grids. And you talk about grids because you could produce electricity in one place and consume in another place. Now, there is something here that happened about 100 years ago that made this possible. I have some pictures here of some very important guys in our history. If I were standing next to you, I'll do a quiz on who are these people. The guy on the left, the handsome-looking guy with this, is Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was one of the pioneers. He was one of the founders of generators with an armature and trying to produce electricity, alternating current. The guy in the middle is Thomas Alva Edison. He showed how to produce DC current. He produced how to make a light bulb. He made phonographs. He made thousands of new inventions, and he was a great entrepreneur. The guy on the right is George Westinghouse. George Westinghouse built the first commercial transmitting company where you can produce power one place and you can consume someplace else. Those three guys we all know. Everybody knows Nikola Tesla, everybody knows Edison. People talk about Westinghouse. Westinghouse Electric is still a big company. But in our story, the heroes are the three dudes in the bottom. The three guys in the bottom who nobody knows. Actually, I can't pronounce their names. They go as ZBD. Those are the only three letters that everybody knows. They're Hungarians. Those three Hungarians invented the transformer. They formed the closed coil transformers. They showed how you can move electricity from one voltage to another voltage and back down. And those guys revolutionized electricity because they showed the power of alternating current, AC. AC became big. So in actually 1900, there was a huge war whether to do AC or DC. Once you know electricity, you know you could transmit. Transmission became so important, and AC won. Edison actually wanted DC. Edison had a massive campaign to propagate that he needed to use DC. Edison actually showed that electrocution as a way to kill people was done with AC, and he actually showed, look, it kills people. And he wanted to have DC working everywhere. Of course, AC, you can transmit long distances power. You could raise the voltage at several thousand volts. You can take it through thousands of kilometers. And here was your first major revolution in energy. You could transmit power. What that sort of did not tell you explicitly, but it is assumed, is that you could produce the power in one place because huge fuels can be transported to one place. So in the olden days, it was coal. So you go to the pit head, where the mine was, the big, huge mine, the pit next to it, you build a power plant. So you don't have to transport the fuel. The fuel is consumed at the point of production. But then you can transmit the power. So it taught us that it is harder to transport fuel, it's easier to transmit electricity. So all of our industries developed with huge gigawatt power plants. Power plants became very large. China today builds a gigawatt power plant every week. Every week of every year, 52 of these things go up in China every year. They build a gigawatt power plant because of their power needs are going up. 1 gigawatt. When I grew up in India, I think all of India's production was less than a gigawatt. Now China adds one every week.
You're 300 years old.
And what we have done is every source of power, the gigawatt is possible because you focus the fuel in one place. Nuclear energy, keep all the fuel in one place, huge plant. Coal, go next to where the coal is, build a huge plant by the port. Similarly, if you are using natural gas, right by where you can get a transmission line, big pipeline of fuel comes in, and you go build the power plant. This is how we learned all our lessons wrong. So what we are going to talk about today is how we unlearn this lesson of huge power plants, centralized production, transmitting over a long distance, distributing it everywhere at the end as power. That's what caused India and Pakistan's biggest problem, is that we don't have the capital, we don't have the fuel, we can't build it in one place. So if you're in India, if you're in Pakistan, if you have to build a gigawatt electric plant, I need to find fuel that all has to be transported to one place. And then I got to have a transmission line built all the way through. Transmission lines are made of copper. By the time you build the plant, you don't have transmission line. If you build the transmission line first, before you build the plant, somebody steals the wire. The net of it is these two don't happen at the same time. I had in my company the cabinet secretary, Indian cabinet secretary for energy. He came in and said, 300 million people, the entire population of the United States, lives at least 50 kilometers from the nearest grid in India. 300 million people live 50 kilometers from the grid. This idea of centralized power production and then transmitting it to everywhere does not work in developing countries. More importantly, and here is where solar comes in. Solar, God distributes the fuel. God distributes and gives you the sunlight wherever you want. You don't need to concentrate the fuel. You don't need to transmit the power. You can use it where the sunlight is. And so this whole theory of centralized power generation, we move away from. And this idea is called distributed generation. So unlearning the past means you got to go away from AC and you got to go away from the huge electrical grid. The huge electrical grid and the necessity to concentrate the fuel and transmit it over long distances does not work for a far-flung country where there are large packets of people that are resident. Now, I'm not saying that AC is not needed. Solar, as we were talking about, is a very weak source of power. The reason solar works, if you go outside in the sun and you don't get burnt down, because solar is a very weak energy. If you drive a regular size car today, it is, let's say, 100 horsepower. It's the weakest car that you can buy. 100 horsepower. Horsepower is 750 watts. That's, if you have a 100 horsepower car, that's 75,000 watts. 75,000 watts requires about a quarter of an acre of solar to produce. If you want to run an all-electric car just on solar, I need to have 1/4 of an acre, 10,000 square foot of solar panels for you to drive today's car. So clearly, if you want a concentrated use of power, you can't use solar. If you really wanted to have a heavy industry, you can't use solar. You got to have a heavy source of fuel, which is petroleum or coal, which is a concentrated solar energy source. It is concentrated because over 1 million years, you have concentrated all the solar energy into a small volume. Think of it, when you drive from your home to college, you have used 250,000 years of sunlight, right? 250,000 years of sunlight has been used up when you use your fuel, which is coal or electricity, to drive from here to about 10 miles. We are using time as our concentrator. If you really wanted very concentrated energy, so you can't use sunlight. But let me use this example. This is a picture on the top left of the mountains, the Garhwal Mountains, just south of Missouri in northern India. It's the lower part of the Himalayas. And on the right, you see that little hamlet there. It's got about 100 homes, maybe about 500 people in that village. And if you notice, there is nothing nearby. There is absolutely nothing nearby. There is no electricity, there is no wires, there is no roads, nothing goes there. How do I get power to those people? If I want them to be productive, what do I do? I cannot wait on a grid. If I don't produce power, I told you there is no GDP, there is no productivity, these people don't going to go anywhere. If they need to be productive, I need to figure out how to give them electricity. And I have to give them electricity, not with a concentrated source where I have to transport either the fuel or a big electric grid to get there. The best way to do it is solar. And the best way to do solar is what I call a DC microgrid. A DC microgrid does everything. And in this case, we implemented this in this village. We put about 10 poles. We planted 10 poles. And on top of each pole, we put one 250-watt solar panel and hooked them up to each house. They got LED lights and they got a fan. And lo and behold, suddenly when they come back from the village school at night, they can actually do homework. They can actually cook at night. It's one light. That couple in their life, for the first time after we did it, they saw electricity in their homes. But you know what they asked me first? Light and all is fine. Where is my TV? That's their first question. So we said, okay, here's the idea we can develop easily. A DC microgrid. A DC microgrid is you produce electricity in solar. Because solar is a DC source, you never invert it. You do not use an inverter. You don't convert it to AC. Fortunately for us, there are very, very high efficiency appliances available now, all DC. So take a typical home in any of in India, in Pakistan, wherever you are. In your living room, what do you normally have where people sit and work? You have probably one fan on the ceiling, two lights, a 30-inch TV, a cable running to it, probably a cell phone charger, probably a hookup for a computer to use, and that's about it. All of this, if you do it in a highly efficient way, can be run for under 100 watts. That's it. For 100 watts, everything in your living room can be taken care of. The highest power consumer, by the way, is your TV volume. When you increase the volume on your TV, you consume more power than anywhere else. It is not your LED light, it is not your fan, it's the volume on your TV. You control the volume on your TV. If you didn't blare it for everybody else, within 100 watts, I can have my entire living room taken care of. So here is the entrepreneurial business idea. If you're an entrepreneur, you can go procure very high efficiency DC appliances. You can build yourself a DC microgrid, either 12 volts or 24 volts. No inverters. There is no round trip energy efficiency loss. You can have controllers. You can go buy them off the internet. You can buy a battery controller that makes sure your battery charges nicely. Make sure it limits it. Make sure you have power priority. Make sure lights come first before you do TV, right? If you can put some sensors, if you have it quiet for a little while, it shuts things down, right? You use the battery size. Usually you need about a 300 amp hour battery. You have a 300 amp hour battery, you are perfectly fine. At a 300 amp hour battery, which is not very expensive, a 300 watt panel, a 300 amp hour battery, you have perpetual power in your living room. Power never goes off. You can run it continuously. That entire package can be done very, very, very easily. Very highly efficient LED lights that consume 1.5, 2 watts. A DC high efficiency fan, 12 watts. You can have 2 of them if you want. You can have a TV that consumes 40 watts. You can have a cell phone charger, 1.5 watts. You can have a laptop. You can have a tablet to go with it. You can actually connect it to a cable modem. You can have your cable TV. All of that for under 100 watts. So there is a classic entrepreneurial business idea. You're solving a local problem. You're solving a local need by thinking outside the box and saying, I don't need centralized power production ever. You never have to pay it to anybody. And and let's say for the sake of argument, you have 2 completely cloudy days. You have solar eclipse for 2 days and nothing happens. You can still have enough juice left in your battery to take care of it. It is not that difficult. A typical day takes, you run the numbers by yourself, 4 hours, 300 watt panel, you get enough power to charge your battery fully, and you can make sure that you can supply your living room. You can't do kitchen, you can't do refrigerators, you cannot do mixies. They are all high intensity power users. But everything in your living room can be taken care of. Right?
Doctor, are you going to talk about the cost as well?
Yeah, I did not explicitly call out the cost, but I can take you through the cost. So socially you can see, there is no carbon dioxide, right? There is no global warming. You can have as many as you want. Uninterrupted, especially an emergency, entertainment, education, whatever you want, it is uninterrupted. No central control on energy. Right? There is nobody, the standard electricity board that shuts off, when the minister comes by, they shuts off your power because they need your light. You can't do any of those, yours is available. Right? High efficiency appliances, they're all there. You get the same enjoyment with less energy needs. There is no existing grid does not get loaded. So you can add thousands of these families and the grid doesn't get overloaded. No transmission, and it's available now. There is nothing. So Dr. Shivani asked me how much does it cost. In every entrepreneurial venture, you need to make money. So let's say in this case, I'm assuming I'm going to make 40% margin. Meaning, if I sell it for 1,000 rupees, I got to have 400 rupees as profits. Right? If I assume that kind of a model. And I can think in Indian rupees or and you may have to convert to
just do it dollars.
In dollars is easy.
Right?
If I do it in dollars, the whole thing can be done cost-wise for about $600. For $600, you'll get a television, you'll get 2 lights, a fan, cell phone charger, wiring, battery, solar panel, all installed in one place.
Laptop.
I won't give you the laptop, but you can get a laptop charger. I can't give you for a laptop. But this, they all included.
600, everything is included. So this means in Pakistan, it will be 60,000 rupees, right?
Oh, yeah, it's more so. It's probably 90,000 rupees, something like that.
90,000 rupees?
This is cost. So I want to make profit. So in India, I'll say 1 lakh rupees. For 1 lakh rupees in India, I can have a television, a perpetually working television. You never have to shut it off. 2 lights, a fan, a cell charger with multiple outputs, USB out so you can connect to it, a laptop charger, and wiring, battery,
And
panel, yes, one solar panel, installation kit to go with it. I can give it to you. Or I can come and put it. The way we do it is the panel is easy install. What you do is 2 concrete blocks or 2 bricks, put them up on top. It's heavy, it doesn't move. You leave it on top of your ceiling. You don't want to put it on the roof, on the road, somebody will steal it. So you put it on your roof. And you can run a wire down and we'll give the wiring. It's quick connect.
1 leg.
2 lights. Is it 2, 1?
1 leg.
2 lights, 1 fan.
1 lakh. Total is like
1 lakh. 1 lakh.
$600, right? $600 is only 60,000 rupees in Pakistan.
Making their
This is cost.
1 lakh unka is
$600 is right. $600.
$600 cost.
$60,000.
$1,000 price. $1,000 price. $600 cost. $400.
60,000.
Right? So a panel today, a 300-watt panel, you get for $150. The biggest cost is the battery. The battery will cost you $250. The rest of them, television,
So
you get
this battery is a truck battery?
regular truck battery, lead acid battery.
It costs $250?
Oh, because 300 amp hour.
Right.
Right? I want to have sufficient battery life.
But this technology is quite common. I mean, truck batteries are common in India and Pakistan.
The interesting thing here is the controller. You got to make sure there is a controller that makes sure, the charge controller that makes sure that the battery charges and discharges and the different inputs are not overdrawing.
How long that battery lasts?
Any typical battery with, if you maintain that it never discharges below 50% and it always stays in that 50 to 80%, that's why I want the larger size battery, because you don't want to drain it down. 5 years. But nothing. I mean, this is the simplest thing you can do. This is brain dead simple idea. Use a distribution network from your village electricity, village appliance store can deliver it for you. Right? So the company is called Energram, and we have Energram exists in India. We got it started. The trouble is I'm here. If I was in India, I'd be running it full time. This is what I would call in entrepreneurship a simple idea. It does not have a lot of startup cost. You can put this together yourself and get it going.
They are very open to.
I'm very open to doing it in Pakistan. I would love for this to happen in Pakistan.
We need to put together an entrepreneurial team who wants to and has the right capital model to get it done.
Exactly.
And there are vast parts of Pakistan, in Balochistan and other places, there's no chance.
Exactly.
Interior.
Same thing. I mean, the cabinet secretary for rural affairs. We are talking about electricity, and I have no plans of putting a grid to these 300 million people. There's nothing. We have no idea how to do it. We have bigger problems to fry right now. These are not. This doesn't happen. Okay. So now I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to switch gears into something very sophisticated now. Right? Now we are going from small science to big science. How do I go from a startup company that is doing something that you can assemble off-the-shelf components to doing something that is truly a new revolutionary phenomenon? In this case, I call it, this is the Twin Creeks Technologies idea. It's called creating substrates with protons. This is true sophisticated science. And you need your material science, and you have to think in terms of old-fashioned atoms and electrons and holes to make this happen. And I'll take you through the idea. In all solid-state technologies, everything is built on substrates. Substrates are a basic need for every one of our solid-state devices, whether they be chips, whether LED lighting, whether it's MEMS, optoelectronics, solar, everywhere, substrates are the basis on which you build it. Most of it is silicon, But in the case of power electronics, it could be germanium, silicon carbide, gallium nitride, or if silicon carbide now is becoming the LED source now, gallium nitride sources, gallium arsenide sources, making lasers. Everywhere, zinc oxide, aluminum nitride, 3,5 compounds, 4,6 compounds, 2,6 compounds, so many of these single crystal materials on which we now build huge solid state businesses. This is a $100 billion business today. Substrates, the $100 billion business is built on substrate. It's even higher. Semiconductors is a $300 billion business, and it is built on. The substrates alone is a $30 billion market there. Surprisingly, making the substrates itself is a very primitive technology. Making the substrate that actually go to build these sophisticated industries is a very primitive technology. Let me show you an example. This is a picture of the way you build marble along the quarry in Italy. That picture in the left side shows how a big block of marble is quarried. And then when you need it to do it on your flooring, you need to produce about 1.5 inch thick slabs. The way it is done is with a rope or a wire saw. A wire saw pours water on it and you pull it back and forth across it and you cleave it. That's how you produce the marble that you have in your house. That's exactly how the substrates today are produced. They take a single crystal, that thing on top which is sort of cylindrical, it's called a boule. They take the boule, shape the sides of it, and then use a wire saw to cut wafers. A wire saw is a diamond encrusted wire that you move back and forth to the slurry and you slice it. Now here is the interesting thing. A typical wafer is about 500 microns thick. The wire is about 250 microns thick, which means by the time you cut one wafer, about a half a wafer just get ground away. It's like taking a loaf of bread and using a power saw to slice it. That's how it is done today. Most of the silicon that you buy is built like this. You take big boules and you take a wire saw and grind and take this sophisticated single crystal silicon, grind it and throw it away. And use only half of it. When we looked at this problem and said, what's wrong with this picture? We are making it like they were making marble 2,000 years ago. We are still doing the same thing, even though the industry is brand new. So we thought about it and came up with this idea called proton-induced exfoliation. The idea is simple. We all know hydrogen ion is a proton. H plus is a proton. You take a hydrogen atom, you remove one electron, and it becomes a proton. You can accelerate them. You can accelerate ions. If you put a voltage across and you have a source of protons, it goes zipping towards your negative potential. If I accelerate it fast enough and I shoot it at the substrate, it penetrates it. It goes way down. The higher the energy, the deeper it goes. If I take it in this case about 1.2 million volts, then I can get it to about 20 microns. 20 microns, which is a good thing. About, remember, 1,000 microns is a millimeter. So this is about 20 microns. If I put enough of these things, when they get down in there, the hydrogen becomes a hydrogen gas back again. If I put enough of them, little micro bubbles of hydrogen form. Now if I went and heated it, the bubbles expand and voila, it lifts the 20 microns up. So nothing is lost. There is no loss when I use the wire saw. Here I can produce just the thickness I want without ever using a saw. I'm using this hydrogen as a scalpel, a fine scalpel that just takes the layer that you need off. I can't produce 500 microns because it's too high a voltage. I'll need a massive accelerator. This technology did not exist when we started out. I needed to produce someplace where I can do this 1.2 million volts, and I needed to produce a proton accelerator. Obviously, I couldn't buy it in Home Depot. So we had to go design a proton accelerator. And this was the fun part. So this is what, when you say big science, what do? So I went looking for people who were accelerator folks. Apparently, accelerators were very popular in the 1950s and 60s. So everyone who was an expert in this was at least 80 years old. I went around the world looking for them. I found a famous guy from New Zealand. I found a famous guy from England. I found a bunch of guys from Boston. We put them all together. We collected a bunch of young engineers. It says, okay, you will be their apprentice. These 80-year-old guys will teach you how to build it. And voila, let's go build ourselves an accelerator. I gave them a relatively small budget, $5 million a year of capital, about 25 guys to go build this. And they built this beast. I think you can next to it.
What year you did this thing, and how is that different from the technology applied capital equipment tools we're using?
Yeah. So I built this in 2010, and Applied does not have this technology. They have implanters that come somewhat close by to this, but this is so much more, maybe 10 times more powerful than any applied machine that there is out there. Let's give you some numbers just to make it interesting. For me to produce enough hydrogen to make bubbles, I need about 100 milliamps of current, 100 milliamps of proton current. And I'm accelerating to 100 milliamps is 0.1 amps. And I'm accelerating to 1 to 2 million volts. Now you can see how much power is needed. 200,000 watts are needed to make that wafer at any given time. So you take a wafer and shoot something at 2 million volts at it, it gets hot very quickly. So the only way we could do it was you shoot it and let quickly rotate it. So a big wheel that you see, it had to rotate at almost 300 RPM. Imagine something about 7 foot tall rotating at 300 RPM. The tips were just subsonic. Yeah. If it went any faster, they will break the speed of light. So you have to keep it at that. Now I have to have this going in there, and I need to cool it. I need to have water cooling in the back of it. So in the middle of that large wheels that look like a bicycle wheel are pipes in which water was going in. In the back of it is a source where I'm accelerating protons to 2 million volts. For every 100,000 volts, at about 1 foot, you'll have a discharge. If I had 100,000 volts, and about a foot from it, if I had something, I'll have an arc. I'm making 2 million volts, which means I can't have anything within 20 feet of it. So that's a 40-foot diameter globe that I need to keep it, which obviously doesn't work. So we need to find a gas that would suppress it. So that in the back is sitting at about 50 atmospheres of sulfur hexafluoride, SF6. That's used in transformers. That's what's suppressing the arc. I have to accelerate something over that many volts. So that accelerated technology we had to develop from scratch. This is classic big science. If you find the right people who know what they're doing, give them right amount of money, right amount of motivation, they will build something as impressive as this. And that's the process chamber that I was just talking about. It shows you the scale of it. There's a guy standing there. He's not a dwarf. He's a normal-sized guy. And you get this thing to spin at 300 RPM and then shoot a beam of protons at 2 million volts, and you can make lamina, very thin solar wafers. And if you make very thin wafers, how do you handle it? We found a brain-dead simple way to do it. We used a regular commercial laminator. That thing we bought from Office Max. You can have in the back a piece of plastic or a piece of anything that you want and put it in, and it laminates, and you have something that you can work with. Right? So you can have this thin lamina that you can handle with some glue that you can come up with the glass or whatever you can use to make it happen. What can I do with it? And I'll actually show this back before so let's say if you had a traditional approach, going back to solar. Let's say you had that big single crystal from which I'm making wafers to make solar. In this case, one ingot at about 200 microns, I can make 3,500 wafers, and I can produce about 15 kilowatts of power. With this technology, the same one ingot produces 45,000 wafers. And I can produce more than 10x more power than you had with your regular wafers at a fraction of the cost. This is goodness everywhere. You consume less material, you produce more power, and it costs less. It's all goodness in everywhere. This is a classic example of a big science project. This requires obviously a lot of capital. And one of the first things that you do is to develop this level of science, you need the university. Most of the early work on this technology, we did this at Stanford University. We go use their implanters, use their laminators, use their technology to build the first solar cell and make it work. The labs that you have in your universities are all you need to build the basic prototype of these. But then to build a big accelerator, you need a lot of capital. Right? There's another thing that you can do with it. It's not just useful for solar panels. Sapphire, the classic material, it's a single crystal material, second hardest in the world after diamond. If you remember your Mohs hardness scale, 1 is chalk and 10 is diamond, 9 is sapphire. If you're trying to make a screen for your iPhone or an iPad, currently they use glass. And you know what happens to glass when you drop it. I mean, it happens to every one of us, and we drop our phone and it breaks. People would have liked to have used plastic, but plastic scratches and is not durable, and then when you put it in the sun, it warps. We would suggest that you use sapphire, except sapphire normally is expensive. If you use enough of it, it's expensive. And the only way normally you would make this sapphire right now is use a wire saw. Because its hardness is 9, the only thing you can cut it with is 10, which is diamond, which is even more expensive. So right now, you can't use sapphire to make thin enough thing. But it's hydrogen. With this scalpel, you can make it very easily. And then you laminate it with a piece of plastic. You now have the toughness of the plastic, it doesn't break, and you have the scratch proof of the lamina of the sapphire. Together, you can make a screen that is the best for any of these appliances. This is a big market that we are exploring with this. Right? So, didn't want to talk about the team and what you can do and all of that, but I want to go back to the idea of entrepreneurship. I want to go back to how you can take science and build big machines to build big things, or small machines to solve problems of power locally. Solar was the glue in all of this. This is how I got interested in solar, and we got to do this technology. So I want to sort of stop here and open for question. I want to just summarize what we talked about it. We talked about entrepreneurship. We talked about energy. We talked about how GDP is connected to energy. We talked about how solar helps you with solving the energy problems. Go back to the DC microgrids, and I gave you the example of Energram. With Twin Creeks, we talked about this big science, how you can create large science projects as companies to go into producing interesting ideas. And now I'm open for you guys to ask questions.
So first, let's go to NED and see if there are any questions in NED.
Hello, sir, my name is Sufyan, and I am from the Business Department. Sir, I heard whatever you said, and my question to you is, like, when we are talking about solar panels, what are the factors on the efficiency of solar panels? Like, is it the shape, is it the area that solar panel occupies, or is it something else?
So I guess the question is, what is the most important thing about the solar panels in terms of area, aspect ratio, angle, what efficiency, what is the most important?
So, different applications require different characteristics. Obviously, everyone likes efficiency because you produce the highest amount of power for the smallest area. So if you had, for example, let's say you wanted to produce a megawatt of electricity. Megawatt of electricity is probably what you need for, let's say, 1,000 homes. So if you have a hamlet that has got 1,000 homes and you want to produce in one place next to it, for 1,000 homes, a megawatt requires about 4 acres. 4 acres of solar panels. 4 acres is at 45,000 square feet. It's about 150,000 square feet you can produce. So if you were to live in an area which is very desert, there's a lot of open spaces. But if you live in the heart of a city, you're living in Karachi, you're in Islamabad, you're in Lahore, you don't have that kind of space. Then efficiency becomes important. Then where you use it decides the next one. If you're going to use it ground mounted, then weight is no longer an issue. You just want to make sure it is bolted right. But if you're going to put it on your roof, then weight becomes important. The third is ruggedness. So if you want it to be scratch-proof, if you're on your roof, there are going to be kids playing cricket nearby and there's going to be a cricket ball falling on it, you want to make sure that that glass is shatterproof. So I got to make sure that I'm not putting a solar panel that is sensitive to breakage. There, a flexible panel makes so much more sense. Something that is laminated with plastic makes it more useful. But glass stays longer. Today, a glass panel lasts 25 years. A plastic obviously degrades with UV. So maybe 8-10 years later, it'll be gone. Fortunately, in inverters, today's inverters last only 10 years. So even if you had a 25-year solar panel, you have to go replace the inverters, which are equally expensive. So you look at these factors. In the end, one of the reasons why we did those thin panels is because I could make a flexible solar panel. Flexible, lightweight, laminatable solar panel that I can use in any application. Something you can roll off on top of your roof. But I can't sacrifice efficiency. Efficiency is always the most important thing.
Sir, I have one more question. Sir, what we believe is all the light that is coming from the solar panel and the energy is finite, right? So, what are we doing is we are taking the finite amount of energy from the infinite amount of energy. Are we doing this, or is there something other phenomenon that we take place? When the solar light comes bypass through the solar panel, like when the solar light is coming towards the solar panel, so here the finite amount of energy we are taking from the infinite energy, for the infinite energy to the light.
I don't know if like
Yeah, I think I did not understand your question, so you probably have to come closer to the mic or somebody else.
I'm asking is, what we are doing, we are taking the energy from the light. The light is coming from the sun, right?
Yes.
So the energy that which is coming from the light, is it infinite or is it finite amount of energy?
So the sun is the source of all energy today, except for nuclear. Other than radioactivity, every one of our other sources of power comes from the sun. Whether it is wind, whether it is tidal, whether it is solar, whether it is fuel, coal, or whether it is gas, they are all in the end coming from the sun. Sun produces and throws off this energy out, and we are capturing it. The only question is, you want a concentrated power or you wanted a lower intensity power. For each of this, we got to use the right source of fuel. A liter of petrol has a lot of very high concentration of energy because the sun's energy has been over several million years, has been concentrated there. But if you want to use a light in your home, you don't need that large a concentrated energy. You can use solar directly. So you have an infinite source of energy from the sun. As long as the sun is alive, which I think is going to be there longer than any of us are alive, you're going to have infinite amount of energy.
So, Dr. Siva, let me ask you a question. So let's say we have a village of 1,000, and what is the cost using anagram technology versus conventional technology? Let's say we buy a gas turbine or a coal plant. Can you compare us? What would be the two?
There are easy conversions called levelized cost of electricity. That's the best way to compare these two. So if you use the technology that we are talking about, we are not giving electricity that is usable for all aspects. We use it only for specific activities. So people have tried to meaning I'm going to use biomass. Then they are not.
Okay, continue.
You never know if you're going to have enough biomass. You need to go. They are very unreliable. So the easiest, as you said, is buy a gas turbine, buy a diesel generator, buy a Honda generator and put it out there. The Honda generator and the cost of the car cost about 5 or 6 times. Oh. So the Honda generator this is the 10. Very high. Fuel cost is there, and then you have the running thing. The small diesel generator is very inefficient. You have it in a large scale. The small diesel generator.
What do you think that why adopt of this idea? I mean, typically you find out in India and Pakistan, if idea is good, people just run with it. I mean, you don't have to do anything. People just do it themselves. So why it has not happened?
First thing, when it comes to electricity, it is the job of the government. The second thing that local electricity board says, electricity, central government can't do it. And we have to get special permission for that.
Actually, to be very honest, in Pakistan, providing getting electricity is easy. The authority of tell that. You can give it free to somebody. But if you try to sell it, you can be put in jail. So that might be
we don't give you the electricity. We just let you apply.
I love it.
That's the only way.
I can't say it. Otherwise, I would regulate. I can make it.
I'm telling you, apply. I'm telling you TV, telling you light. I'm collecting light. I can do that. I can tell you that.
And there's no power.
I'm not buying. I'm electricity. I'm an appliance.
Let's take another question from camera display. Sivaram for a very interesting lecture. I certainly enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody else learned a lot from it. So Dr. Sivaram, thank you very much for taking your time from your busy schedule in the middle of this night here and giving. Thank you so much. You have my appreciation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sivaram, for doing this thing. It was really impressive. I mean, I enjoyed it, every moment of it. So that was really good. Thank you for doing it. For our teams, I know I don't see any over there. I'm pretty sure you're there. I want to tell this was the last of our event of the seminars. So thank you for being here and being the avid partner in our effort to connect our schools to Silicon Valley. With today's session, we conclude our seminar series, I in Silicon Valley, to a successful completion. Hopefully, it has given you an eye in Silicon Valley, a source, so you're able to see the bleeding edge technologies and the entrepreneurship concepts that matter. Our next series of these seminars, I in Silicon Valley, will resume August 6th, Thursday. And for a science book club, I would recommend, I would say the book from the electrical thing we talked about today, the Tesla. It's the inventor of the technical age, Nikola Tesla, by Bernard Carlson. Tesla was born in 1856 and he came to United States in 1884 penniless. Now, I want to say this book, I would not recommend the book, predominantly because it is about history of Tesla, and that does not interest me so much. It does, I mean, it's a value, but there's a philosophy behind when I give this book of science, is things that can bring paradigm shift in our thinking and thinking through science. So that it does not meet that criteria, but it was a book we read in a science book club, and it was very relevant to today's discussion. So I would want to recommend the book Tesla, Inventor of the Technical Age. It's about Nikola Tesla, and it's about Bernard Carlson. So hopefully you guys will do the science book club and meet once a month and discuss these books with your friends. And hopefully there are women are in there to empower them by these technical discussions and education. With that, if you don't have any further questions, we would shut it down. And inshallah, we will resume next in August 6th, whatever day it was. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.